What companies do you think will go bankrupt in the next 10 years? Why? Hopefully, Yelp. From everything I've heard, it sounds like they're trying to justify their own existence by bullying small businesses into signing up for premium and ads, and will even adjust their reviews negatively if they don't comply. I interviewed for a sales job there a couple of weeks ago and got weird vibes. When I asked what was most surprising to new hires after a few months, he said that it doesn't get easier. I guess their reviews aren't even helpful anymore. Story 2. In the UK, Sky TV, their whole business model since they launched in the early 90s has been to buy up sporting rights and whatever TV programs are popular and then put them behind a paywall. They've had the best of the Premier League rights since it launched in 1992, and if a program got popular on free-to-air TV, they'd swoop in and buy up the rights. For example, they did that with Lost when its first series aired in the UK on Channel 4 and was a hit. Now they have a problem. They're losing subscribers to all the various different streaming services, plus they're struggling to get their existing satellite customers onto their own streaming service, and their satellites will be life expired before the end of the decade. And because they are paying ridiculous amounts to keep the Premier League rights, this means that their high subscription prices are driving a lot of people to using dodgy boxes. And their Achilles heel is the fact that they haven't produced a huge amount of content of their own, apart from sporting programs which have a short shelf life. So unlike over legacy broadcasters, they don't have a huge catalog of content to fall back on to attract customers. I would be genuinely surprised if they exist in the same form come the end of the decade. Story 3. iRobot. They've been so far behind other robotic vacuums for a long time. I even beta tested a couple before they launched, and wow, just their whole mapping tech is awful. Relying too much on the camera with no LiDAR was a mistake when everyone else was using LiDAR. The camera is nice for object avoidance, but that's all it's good for. It still plays bumper cars with all of my walls and furniture when I tested them. They have now added LiDAR, but I think it's a little too late. Story 4. A Cinnabon shop opened up in my city 6 months ago and I went to check it out. A plain, ordinary Cinnabon is $9.90. The ones with toppings are $10.40. These are just cinnamon rolls. I can walk next door to Woolies and get 2 for $4. I've never seen anybody buy from there or even browsing. I'm pretty sure they will be gone soon. If the parent company is this badly priced, they too will disappear. Story 5. Maybe not full bankruptcy, but I could see Tesla crashing. They took off when EVs were new, but there's a lot more competition now. They've also become too political. A lot of folks won't buy their products because they don't want to be associated with Musk. Musk himself seems like he's becoming increasingly erratic, and I think he makes a lot of decisions that do not help his businesses. I think the company would do well if they replaced him as CEO, but this is unlikely to happen since he seems to control the board. Their stock is overvalued relative to the company's sales and revenue. Even before the disaster with the Cybertruck, sales were softening as consumer demand for EVs grew softer. Other car companies have shown themselves capable of delivering comparable cars to Tesla's limited offering, but with a wider range of options and a wider range of price points. Furthermore, car companies like Ford and Hyundai benefit from more robust parts supply networks and nationwide dealerships and repair centers, which Tesla still struggles with after more than a decade. Failure to deliver. Musk has promised several features in vehicles that have yet to materialize, some after more than a decade of broken promises. Self-driving tech is still unreliable compared to competitor systems. The Tesla automated battery swap service never materialized. The Cybertruck is a failure because of poor design and bad build quality. Tesla automated taxis still don't exist despite first being announced a decade ago and prototypes shown in 2020, and the electric semi-truck still isn't available, etc. The CEO of Tesla managed to severely alienate his company's core customer segment. EVs typically appeal to liberal drivers who care about the environment and climate change. However, Musk decided to help re-elect Donald Trump, attempted to dismantle the EPA while leading Doge, and publicly expressed opinions suggesting that climate change is a hoax. Story 6. Hasbro. They've had multiple layoffs. D&D 5.5 isn't selling as well as they would like, and the D&D movie lost money. They sold E1, the company that made the D&D movie, at a huge loss. They canceled all their in-house video games and closed their game studio. Liquidation stores like Ollie's are full of their board games and action figures. The only things keeping them alive are Monopoly Go and Magic the Gathering Arena. I think they'll either go away completely in the next 10 years or will simply become an IP licensing company that licenses their brands, Transformers, G.I. Joe, My Little Pony, Magic the Gathering, D&D, Monopoly, etc., to other companies to make physical products, video games, and other online experiences, and then just collect a paycheck for licensing fees. They'll go from being a huge corporation to a small shell company with a few dozen employees just to negotiate licensing deals. Story 7. We will see an end to paper mail billing, advertisements, and credit card loan/scam paper mail. If companies across the USA had any sense, they'd stop sending paper mail advertisements, notifications, and billing. Between the insane cost of postage, the cost of paper, the cost of processing the mail, and the overall cost in waste, we have to cut the cord. If companies want to save some money, they need to shut down the wasteful, awful big mailers who are filling landfills with decayed trees. These mailers get literally 2 seconds of view in the hand of the consumer before going immediately to the trash, leading to landfill use and ultimately bankruptcy for the senders. Email is free. Automated email is free. One bill does the job of 20. You sending me 300 bills over 1 year cost you $600 in billing me via paper. When I owed you $7.49 on a lab bill, which your payment site won't process because the balance is too low for a transaction, you sending me 200 mailers over 12 months cost you thousands when I throw them immediately into the trash after tearing them in half. Really though, do people sit around understanding that a paper mail advertising campaign costs them so much for so little saturation or conversion to sales? They know well that it will mean the trees they love on forestry land and even in national parks can be chopped down, turned into pristine bleached paper, sent to a mailer mill, printed on, mailed to a human who throws it away immediately, and this is somehow a viable business model? We can do better, USA. Story 8. Stellantis, the former CEO, bled money out of the company for 3 years while simultaneously forcing the development of models that don't sell and canceling products that do sell. He also stripped so much quality out of the vehicles under the guise of cost-cutting that warranty repair costs are now sky-high, and customer satisfaction and loyalty is at all-time lows due to the horrendous reliability. They're trying to right the ship now, but they've lost so much qualified personnel, I'm not sure if it's possible to recover. Story 9. Tim Hortons, many years ago, was bought out by a Brazilian entity, Restaurant Brands International, RBI, and they absolutely destroyed the classic products like coffee and donuts. The company's focus shifted towards cost-cutting and increasing efficiency, which the writer believes compromised product quality. Their coffee roasters have changed, and the current brew tastes like soggy cardboard water. They used to have some great fresh-baked donuts and Timbits, but those products have been reduced and are now pre-baked and frozen, then shipped to franchises to sell. They keep claiming and profiting off of their Canadian identity, but there is no longer anything Canadian about this brand. They have also exploited the Canadian Temporary Foreign Workers Program, claiming they can't hire any Canadians to work there. All staff in almost every location is 100% of South Asian descent. They also cut employee benefits in response to a minimum wage increase. They're also expensive now, no longer providing products or services of value worth their asking price tags. They also prompt you to tip on the orders when paying by plastic, however the tips are not distributed to the employees. Story 10. 3M, they've been without real leadership for about 25 years since they hired McNerney, and that's when the decline started. Those in the C-suite no longer wanted to invest and build, they simply wanted to be a venture capital group and move money around. Plagued with lawsuits a couple of years ago, they spun off a third of the company and a third of the revenue and profits, the healthcare group, in what those close to the company say was simply a money grab to deal with impending PFAS suits in the billions, the hearing protection lawsuits that they keep fumbling and other issues. The C-suite failed 3M more than the economy, the market, or anything else. Story 11. Self-storage. There's been an absolutely crazy boom of self-storage facilities basically all over the country, and while many of them will probably still be around in 10 years, I think a huge portion of them will be vacant in a decade. The boom has largely been caused by 3 factors: the sheer amount of stuff boomers keep for whatever reason, the recent post-lockdown internal migration, and the fact that developers have realized the low overhead and steady income of a self-storage facility is better than sitting on vacant lots or gambling on commercial developments. The problem is the first 2 factors aren't going to last forever, and the third is predicated on the first 2. There's basically no way to actually know how much demand there is for self-storage, as that requires knowing how much stuff people in the area have and want to store. At the rate these facilities are being built, I think they're going to overshoot the demand. Then the boomers will go away, and the younger generations haven't shown the same proclivity for keeping things just to keep things. Plus, internal migration is slowing, so demand will drop off right as the supply peaks. Yes, these facilities have low overhead, but they still need some amount of income to be worth keeping around. Story 12. FedEx. Virtually every shipment received from FedEx over, the last several decades has come with some inconvenience, typically undeliverable or some other hassle. The website is just as bad. Want to update delivery instructions as I just tried a few minutes ago, knowing they're absolutely going to mess up a shipment that is scheduled to arrive today? The system is unavailable. Please try again later. Any company that ships with FedEx is automatically getting a 1-star review on Google from here with an explanation of why. You ship with FedEx, you get a 1-star review. Story 13. I think the penny is about to drop regarding healthcare. A lot of young people are getting more ill, either through working to make ends meet or through a rise in illness through poor nutrition, lifestyle, etc. Eventually, those in the US will wonder why the heck it costs them 1,000 times more than it costs people in other countries. No joke. The medication I take for ulcerative colitis is free, and my doctor prescribes the best medication for the job. In the US, the same would cost me thousands if my insurance would even let me have it. It would be a revolution in the US, but would probably end dozens of large companies dedicated to health insurance. Story 14. Hobby Lobby. I just got done working for them. I know, it's a horrible company, but the coworkers in my store were pretty cool with having me as their queer coworker. But if my store was any sign, they're close to the end. People who shop there mostly shop there for the Christian experience, but that's not enough to keep stores open. The top brass are trickling down some insanely negative stuff that will have even the best managers putting insane amounts of pressure on employees that they're not doing enough. Also, the return policy is insanely stupid. I'd say half of what we sell comes back, often just for seniors to have something to do, and we'd have to accept anything. We literally had to accept clearly used food containers one time. If I hadn't been there that day to catch it, they would have put that stuff back on the shelves in my department. I love most of my coworkers and even my managers, but the company as a whole is extremely toxic. Story 15. My own company, honestly. Without giving away too many details, they split with a parent company years ago and basically took all the debt with them. They got caught bribing officials in a foreign country and got massively fined. So we have 9 figures in debt, and now they're selling off any and all assets in foreign countries to stay afloat and pay back that debt. Even then, my branch's projected revenue that corporate wants us to hit decreased from 2024 to 2025. Decreased. That never happens. I'm on a sinking ship. It reminds me of the scene in Margin Call where they say the music hasn't stopped yet, but it's starting to slow. You might say it seems like it's already stopped, but the company at a local level keeps trying to pretend it's all fine and business as usual. Don't worry, I've been keeping my eye out for other passing ships. Story 16. Ford of Europe. They're pretty much gone over here as it stands, having discounted the Fiesta, Focus, Mondeo, and all their commercial vehicles are being shared with VW. Their only models are a few SUV crossovers and bland electric cars that nobody is interested in. Franchise dealerships, including one in my city that had been in business since 1925, have been sold off. In terms of market share in Europe, it has been declining year on year for a long time now. The Korean brands build a better budget car, taking that market, and the VW group have raised the bar massively in terms of value for money across their many brands and taken the middle market away. European Ford cars were always kind of crap, but people put up with them as they had a strong brand and were typically one of the newer cars you could buy cheaply. Story 17. I think most AAA game developers will go under. The gaming space is just too competitive now, the cost to make AAA games is too high, and the massive staff and overhead prevent actual creativity and risk-taking, which is what made the industry so great to begin with. Ubisoft in particular, they have a massive staff, but they are essentially just an Assassin's Creed developer now, which has massively lost its popularity since Valhalla came out and the recent disappointment around Shadows. They may get acquired, but most likely, even after being acquired, they'd be shut down after an inevitable series of flops. They need a massive new IP that reinvents the company, or it's over for them. Story 18. My money is on Joanne Fabrics, and it breaks my heart a little. Walking into one feels like entering a time capsule from 1998. The business model seems to be built on 2 pillars, the sheer chaos of their fabric cutting counter, and an endless stream of 40% off coupons that you can never find when you actually need one. But in the age of Amazon for cheap supplies and TikTok/YouTube for free high-quality tutorials on any craft imaginable, what is their fundamental purpose? They are a massive, expensive physical warehouse for a hobby that has largely migrated online. It's a business model from a pre-internet era, and much like Blockbuster, I don't see how they can compete with a world that's faster, cheaper, and more convenient. They're a relic, and relics just don't last forever. Story 19. People say Apple can never go bankrupt, but if you actually map it out, there's a very low but real path. iPhone dependency, it's still roughly 50% of revenue. If global upgrade cycles stall and cheaper Chinese brands eat their lunch, Apple's cash flow shrinks fast. Regulators, the EU and others are already fighting them and forcing App Store changes. If that snowballs into global remedies and damages, their high-margin services business gets gutted. AI lag. Investors are rewarding Nvidia, Google, and Microsoft. If Apple keeps lagging behind in AI, the market can re-rate them from growth giant to mature hardware company, tanking the stock multiples. Supply chain risk. They're deeply tied to China and Taiwan. A serious geopolitical shock could literally halt iPhone production. Debt versus cash. Yes, they have approximately $130 billion in liquid assets, but also approximately $100 billion in debt. If cash flow dries up and credit marketers panic, that cushion isn't infinite. Put all of that together, collapsing iPhone demand, regulators eating margins, the supply chain frozen, investors rotating out, and debt pressure, and suddenly even Apple could spiral towards insolvency. Is it likely? No, but too big to fail is the kind of thinking people had about other giants before they crashed. Story 20. I hate to count them out, but probably Netflix. I was a member and got VHS tapes delivered to me in Saudi Arabia. Then they switched to DVDs, sent me a player in Saudi, and I kept with them. When they started streaming, I figured that was the end of them. Dial-up speeds were crap back then, and I didn't see it working out. I was wrong, but now with all the different streaming services out there, it seems to me that Netflix can't survive. Story 21. In 10 years, obviously a lot of companies will fail, so I'll choose a large company, Tesla. I feel the brand damage being done by Musk's foray into politics has permanently turned off a large segment of the population from ever owning a Tesla product. Beyond that, it feels like Musk is shifting the company's focus away from electric cars and staking a lot of the company's future on automation and robotics. On the automation front, Tesla has never released a version of self-driving that didn't require a human monitoring while other companies have. On the robotic side, I've not seen anything to convince me humanoid robots will ever be more than a luxury, curiosity, novelty item or something with very specific use cases. Tesla, again, is seemingly well behind other companies on the tech side of robotics anyway. The stock price and health of the company are being propped up by Musk selling these technologies as the future, with outlandish projections of revenue and profitability, but today, no real results to show for it. Eventually, he will have to show these things have both a strong demand and are profitable businesses. 10 years seems like a good timeline. Story 22. Google is losing its edge with LLMs, large language models, and is trying to push its own AI, which is an LLM that is quite a few years behind the competition. Their phone department is also struggling. Add that to the fact that the CEO ended off all of the projects to expand Google into other markets, and the ship is sinking. Microsoft, it's all the things I said about Google with the added fact that people are sick of Windows 11 stealing information and giving it to the US government. As time goes on, more OSs will be built on Linux and will slowly undermine them from the inside. Plus, all the stuff they pulled with SharePoint and handing data from the feds to China will come back to haunt them. Meta, same as Google and Microsoft, but also all of their platforms are losing people as users learn more and more about the dangers of social media. Tesla, they can keep the stock prices pumped, but can they sell cars? Story 23. Long John Silver's. I've never known anyone who eats there, nor even ever heard a friend mention a single visit to LJS. Most people who ever mention it say they find the idea of drive-through seafood repulsive. People are getting more and more at their breaking point with fast food. They're abandoning more mainstay fast food staples like McDonald's, Taco Bell, and KFC for being too expensive and worse in quality. I can't imagine LJS will hang on to a life-sustaining customer base much longer. I'm not even sure how they didn't go out of business 10 years ago. Story 24. Honestly, most of these predictions are just nonsense. It has nothing to do with business practices, and I hate that we think that. In fact, Instant Pot almost went out of business for doing things correctly. But then you have companies like Uber where their entire premise and marketing speak sound nice, but in the end, it's the same thing. Burn through VC cash to condition people to expect this so they have no other options. Then everything else leaves, taking away community, the social contract, and social constructs. Then remove it, send your customer service overseas, and call it a day. But then you look at companies like Airbnb, when the masses started using it to their benefit to get around the 2-day-a-week work from home rule and still be able to live in Texas or just travel most of the time or Ohio or upstate New York or whatever, that's when they all of a sudden started listening to the plebeians and passing things, banning Airbnb. Story 25. Intel, the 15th gen, had horrible reception. 14th and 13th gen had electrical problems. Already going to a new socket for 16th gen, bad timing for a rebrand of their CPUs to Ultra something. Instead of i3 579, questionable ties to the US government, AMD is making gains in retention for both GPU and CPU, focusing on the gaming enthusiasts. Getting a good product in their hands is free marketing as they know it. All nerds rave about them to their fair weather consumers. AMD will never catch Nvidia, but they sure as hell can crush Intel with the way things are trending. And if you agree with at least one of these stories so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 26. I live in Argentina, so any company is at any given time at a moderate risk of collapsing solely because of the fact that they operate in Argentina. But I feel El Club de la Milanesa is close to ending. Some context, Milanesa is a traditional Argentine dish that derives from either the German Austrian schnitzel or most likely the Italian cotoletta alla Milanese. It's a slim cut of generally cheap beef or a chicken breast, although the chicken thigh ones are peak. coated in egg, breaded, and either fried or baked. It is super simple, economical to make, and easy to prepare, cook, freeze, and stock up on. It might be the Argentine home-cooked meal. Now, what is El Club de la Milanesa? It's a restaurant chain built around this dish. When they opened up, they started with a premium version of the dish with big sizes, lots of toppings, a thicker cut of meat in the Milanesa, and amazing fries to accompany the meal. During the post-pandemic, they decided to cut costs, leading to the previously premium quality Milanesas becoming an even cheaper version of than the ones people were already making at home, while keeping the same price, having the portion size, and being severely understocked on all toppings. Why do I feel they are sinking? They have dozens of locations in expensive neighborhoods, and due to the drop in quality, their reputation and customer base got decimated. Recently, they made a massive advertising campaign promoting that they went back to the original recipe, but the restaurants are almost as empty now as they were during the lockdown. And Argentina had one of the longest and most restrictive isolation policies of any country from what I know, so that's not good, like at all. Story 27. Canada Post 100%. This is from a former CUPW employee. The government and the company are intentionally trying to tank themselves and their workers. When it works for them, we're heroes. When it doesn't work for them, they send their minions to interfere with your work life. For example, there's not enough mail for your shift, but you cannot leave. Also, supervisors follow you to the bathroom and clock it even if you're standing with nothing to do. There was even a Reddit or maybe a Facebook post showing viewing windows behind bathroom stalls with a false wall where the supervisors could peer in. It is an absolutely toxic work environment. Despite anyone's education, status, ethnicity, etc., nobody should have to work with this hanging over their heads, only then to be vilified for wanting pay that reflects the huge effort we've put in. I believe there has been no collective agreement between the workers' union and the company for 12 years. We were forced to work during COVID, and negotiations were simply canceled because of the pandemic. When the workers are asking for a contract and that kind of retrospective, how is it that the public hates us? Open the floodgates to hate. I should have been born into a better house somewhere just so I could hate the people under me who worked their butt off to make sure your ATV had tires, a necessity in the worst of times. I don't believe in the Canadian public anymore. That is heartless. Story 28. Riot Games. League of Legends just changed too much. Older players feel more and more alienated, but also the game has been out long enough that new players can't really get into it. They had a good thing going with the Legends of Runeterra right as casual Magic the Gathering was blowing up, and then they decided to give up on the 4-player mode and focus on PvE. Plus, going with set rotation ended the main attractive feature of the game, which was the lack of rotation. Does anyone even play Valorant anymore? Arcane and Wild Rift will 100% keep them going for a few years longer, but not for a whole decade, I think. Story 29. Top Pot Donuts, Seattle, Washington. The company is hemorrhaging money, closing stores, and employees are trying to unionize. Management keeps investing in new tech the customer base doesn't like or want. They went for a much darker roast that customers don't like, and the owner's wife reportedly screams at homeless people. The owner and his brother had a falling out that is starting to become public. Overall, they are trying to copy Starbucks now that SB lost a mass market share in the area, without first asking why SB lost that market share. I give them about 5 to 10 years of slow decline before people start drinking better coffee, not to mention their planned expansion into Texas that went belly up right away because it was a terrible idea. Once the locals out here find out about the company's alleged ties to Amazon's Trump re-election fund, it's basically over for them. Story 30. I'm no economist, but my chronically online crystal ball tells of a few companies. Ford, they've been struggling for years and they don't seem capable of building affordable cars. People are already struggling to buy food and now utility bills are starting to hurt. We've already seen dealerships packed with $65,000 plus massive pickups. Nobody is buying them. Airlines, Spirit, Frontier, Southwest, this essentially goes for any US-based commercial airline. Spirit already filed for bankruptcy and it's expected they stop operations within a year. Frontier has a similar model and Southwest hasn't been doing too hot either. I think Delta will struggle, but they apparently got through the lockdown pretty well by switching from passenger to cargo, and I think they can do it again. People in general can't afford trips anymore and the world has lost trust with the US. It's generally seen as unsafe to vacation in the US with Trump's isolationist policies, and I don't think it'll heal even when he's out of office. Intel, resting CPUs and large companies switching from Intel. They're struggling to continue construction on their major fabs, and with Trump getting rid of the remainder of the CHIPS Act, it will take a long time for them to ever finish them. The 10% stake might help, but unless they clean up their act, it's over for them. Food chains, Subway, Jersey Mike's, Denny's, IHOP. Let's just go with most food takeout slash sit down, low quality ingredients at extreme prices. I saw Subway footlong go for over $10. This is another service that people can't afford, and these companies are firing themselves in the foot by lowering the quality of their food, greed, essentially. Spotify, they hardly pay their artists, and more have been walking away, especially now that they're using AI generated music. They finally added lossless audio, but the only time a company ever improves their product is when they're hurting or can sense they're going to struggle. Story 31. I'll swing big. Boeing. Starliner has ended. Their airline reputation is in tatters. They seem to be a black swan event away from the auction block if orders get canceled. Tesla. When China wipes the floor with the USA in the trade war within the next year, Tesla will not be able to withstand the correction that comes along with the recession. Their evaporating market share, the failed Cybertruck, and the utterly failed self-driving enterprise. Nobody wants unsafe and unreliable cars from a toxic brand. They are overpriced and very soon will have their entire catalog outperformed by the EV and hybrid offerings of all the traditional automakers. Massive tariffs are the only reason Chinese EVs are not completely dominant in the same way they dominate computers, phones, and drones. Story 32. Very few big companies go bankrupt unless they're getting exploited by private equity. Even Blockbuster is still technically around, one franchise store, and even companies that file for bankruptcy still operate. Maybe their corporate entity shuts down and then they sell off the naming rights and somebody else opens a new business under the old name or whatever. Or you get situations like Sears that is basically gone but still has a handful of stores or whatever. The real question should be, what business is fashionable today that will fall out of fashion in the next 10 years and significantly reduce its footprint in the consumer mind? There will probably be a lot of them. I think Netflix is potentially one of those companies. Also, Hulu is probably one of them, and Paramount Plus. Will any of them specifically go bankrupt? Probably not, but one of them probably will. Story 33. GameStop. They saw it coming when 7th generation consoles came out and let you download whole games directly. But there just wasn't much they could do about it since they were stuck in the mode that reserves and subscriptions was the only way, the truth and the light. They kind of forgot where customer service and good store management figured in. They continued to push hard on the numbers business and ignored the people's business, and it cost them a lot. I probably should have left them a year or two earlier than I did, but at least I managed to leave before they really tipped over the edge. Story 34. Manufactured home companies. I work in insurance, and the amount of people coming to us for quotes for their manufactured home because their current company is either going out of business or flat out refusing to insure manufactured homes has gone up in the 7 months I've been at the company. The value isn't great on them. The company I work for won't insure them for anything other than actual cash value, which is the brand new cost minus depreciation for those that don't know what that is, if the home is over 10 years old. I have yet to see a quote for one that's less than $1,200 a year for less than $80,000 in coverage. For a rough perspective, I wrote a traditional stick-built home with $900,000 in coverage for $900 a year. Our company's way of saying, we'll insure the manufactured home, but we'd really rather not. In my area, it's a challenge to get a first-time homeowner loan and buy a manufactured home. Most loans for those need to be conventional plans with a 10% down payment. The market for them is just declining, and with most millennials and Gen Z not buying houses because, well, how can we? I see manufactured homes becoming something no longer made in 10 years. Story 35. There are a lot of companies being stated here that are trendy to criticize because their corporate strategy is a mess, but it doesn't mean that they don't have assets that have residual value. Also, I presume the question is bankruptcy, like how Sears or Toys R Us as brands basically disappeared because their business model failed to adapt and their brands have little residual value, and not bankruptcy like going into Chapter 11 to restructure debts. It's hard to see how a brand like Staples is still around, but I'm guessing they're glorified print and UPS shipping centers at this point, and that's enough to keep them around. I can see Spirit Airlines going completely out unless they do something drastic. Their business model is a race to the bottom for low-cost flyers to vacation destinations in an industry where everyone has figured out how to sell or subsidize low-cost tickets. They're already axing routes, which tells me they're going to basically operate out of 1 or 2 hub cities, and that's it. Maybe that will work, maybe not, but other airlines are already circling the waters. Bob Evans, there's a brand that will disappear, and it doesn't seem like they're attempting to adapt. Cracker Barrel is probably 10 years behind Bob Evans at this point. Their positions next to highways and large lots lend themselves to becoming a network of electric car charging stations. Add to that a kitschy Wild West general goods store and a kitchen that makes old school American comfort food, and I think you have a decent business model. It'd be a literal modern take on the stereotypical Old West saloon, a Buc-ee's for electric cars. Story 36. I have a feeling a lot of subscription-based services are going to have to ease up on their prices soon. In the case of streaming, as more and more people turn away because it's more than it's worth just to have to watch ads anyway, streaming services will legitimately have to compete with piracy, and they'll soon discover that they straight up can't. The old shows that have been pirated and distributed are beloved and widely available outside of their platforms and can typically be bought physically for far less. And the new ones that are coming out straight up aren't good enough to justify $20 a month for 2 screens or whatever. One of Netflix, Hulu, Max, formerly HBO, or Paramount Plus goes away in the next decade because they literally won't be worth what they don't offer. Adobe too, also for reasons of greed. If they are to survive, they'll go back to one-time purchases for their apps and such. They'll get rid of the subscription nonsense. Or they won't, and they'll end up going under anyway. Either way, as they continue to fancy themselves hot stuff, more and more prospective studios make better-priced alternatives that are just as good. Clip Studio Paint kicks Illustrator's butt. Luminar Neo, Canva, Krita, GIMP, Affinity Photo all are cheaper and or are one-time purchases that offer the literal same features as Photoshop with less limiting PC requirements at that. If we think about what Adobe is doing here, they've taken their user base, they've cut off anybody that doesn't have at least a fairly powerful system plus GPU, and then they've priced their subscription to be literally 10 times that of competitors offering the same things. Adobe is out. EA, Electronic Arts, and I think EA is worth throwing in there. Their sports department has got to be in its last decade or so with the way it's going. They haven't released a genuinely decent sports title since NHL 14 in 2013. They got dragged through Gen 8 and most of the way through Gen 9. Nearly every game EA Sports has released this generation has ranged from disastrous to outright insulting, with the exception of College Football 25. They claim they don't have the budget, yet they do nothing but make money. They claim they don't have the time, yet they typically work on NHL for 3 to 5 months, Madden for 5 or 6 months, and FCS for 7 months on a good year. 2K is beating their ass, and the only notes they took from 2K was having pay to win single-player modes. That's pathetic. EA can't survive another decade of that, not after the Xbox 360. The console all of their best games were released on now officially has a full persistent soft mod. Story 37. I hope it's Intuit. I've been an accountant willingly tied to their platforms for over a decade, but in the last few months they've started forcing new UIs and AI upgrades that aren't actually helpful and honestly slow things down. We'll abandon them as soon as we can find a replacement. We're already hunting. I hope it bankrupts them. I really hope every small business bookkeeper and accountant bails on this awful changeover plan that no one asked for. I hope the monopoly on accounting platforms comes to an end. Story 38. Google. For the last 5 years before ChatGPT, they did nothing in the AI space. They just kept milking their cloud customers by increasing prices. Ad revenue is declining worldwide, and they did nothing innovative. Then ChatGPT came. Today, I don't even use Google for finding answers. I ask ChatGPT instead. It even researches and finds answers for me with citations. The AI mode from Google is a little, too late, and most importantly, it still doesn't know what I want from my query. Google forgot why they were popular in the first place. They got people what they were searching for. No drama. Today, it's just an SEO-optimized cluster crap they call results that even robots hate reading. Story 39. Twitter, now X, is legitimately likely to go bankrupt. I've never seen such a spectacular failure before. The advertising money is having a mass exodus because the owner literally tells them all to screw off and is hell-bent on destroying the brand. Make a joke bid for $44 billion and be legally forced to follow through, change a globally recognized brand, do away with the system that allowed legitimate accounts to be recognized for a system that barely generates any money, tell all the real money to screw off, turn the platform into a cesspool that causes more advertising money to exit, and you get to watch a billionaire take away a large part of their wealth in train wreck fashion. The bankruptcy of X will most definitely cause fallout in his other ventures too. Soon enough, people will realize that Tesla is literally just a car company and value it appropriately. When Tesla goes to realistic levels, there goes another massive part of Elon's fortune. No, Tesla will not disappear, but it sure as hell isn't a $600 billion company when the reality hits. Story 40. With interest rates going up and expected to stay higher for longer, it's likely any company with mostly debt financing will be burdened when they need to refinance those terms. So think large utility companies, established car companies, and real estate holdings. Those will be the big name ones likely to go under. Other than that, it's companies sensitive to the business cycle. Think construction companies, luxury goods, travel, tourism, that sort of stuff. And then there's just everyone already struggling. The final nail might come sooner or later. Story 41. Department stores in general. I love Bosovs. They are the last of the old guard department stores. They're family owned, and it feels like you're stepping into a major department store in the early 80s. They're fully staffed, their employees get full time hours with benefits. You can always find an employee, and they can always help. They still have travel agents and a handful of in store restaurants. They have in store chocolate departments, not like an aisle of chocolate, but an actual large refrigerated chocolate counter. They have a very relaxed, visibly old school aesthetic with a decent selection and consistent availability. Their stores are clean and well organized. They sell some brands that you won't find anywhere else. Their prices are excellent, somewhere between Target and Amazon. Their customer service is on par with Costco, and they've resisted going full Walmart, so their stores are well maintained. 20 years ago, they flirted with bankruptcy and were actually bailed out by the state of Pennsylvania. At the time, I was really against that because that's the nature of business. Some companies fail. But now I'm really glad they're still around. I patronize them whenever I need something that they carry. If they ever go out of business, it will truly be the end of an era. When you step into a Bosovs, it's like stepping back into 1983 in every good way. You almost wouldn't be surprised to find an electronics department selling C64s and Atari 800s. Story 42. Burger King is getting an influx of funding from its parent company right now, Restaurant Brands International, who also owns Popeyes and Firehouse Subs. But around me, it seems like locations are closing left and right, and those that remain are outdated, dirty, worn, and have maintenance issues on the building, etc. All evidence that the company, or perhaps franchisees, just aren't finding the money to keep up. Deferred maintenance is often a sign of impending doom. If you can't afford the maintenance today, how are you going to afford the repairs later? Popeyes, on the other hand, is growing, and so is Firehouse Subs. It makes me wonder if Burger King isn't going to stick around for a while just as a place to siphon a few bucks from while claiming big losses before selling it off, i.e., deferred maintenance, upgrades, and updates are because they are trying to extract every dime before eventually shuttering. There's no point putting a new pool in the backyard if you're planning to move next year, you know? Large companies rarely fold anymore. They're so huge and have so much momentum, and there are so many hungry investors out there, but they certainly do shrink, decline, and then get sold off. Story 43. I actually think that Amazon will see some form of breakup. No, it won't disappear, but it is so obviously a monopoly in 6 ways to Sunday that once I saw Mafia Don, most divorced man in the world Bezos with his lingerie wifey, it started to feel like this was a man that had no friends. I mean, they sell crap. Unless you search for the actual deep link to the brand and specific text of the item you want, or track it in on some deep link from another site, you aren't going to get what you're looking for, but rather some BS knockoff from the nether regions of post-capitalist China. About 1 in 3 items I get from there is not what I actually ordered in some way. In the last few months, I've had legitimate reviews removed because they were honest. I've had bait and switch. I'm in the process of complaining to them because they charged my card after I ended Prime. I've had the, hey, change your review for a discount nonsense, all kinds of BS. Story 44. My bet is on Nvidia. Nvidia is going so hard into the server market that I see them splitting into 2 companies. Nvidia making server GPUs and GeForce making gaming/regular user GPUs. Intel is starting to make significant noise in the market and will probably get a large chunk of what was previously Nvidia's customer base through pre-builds and integrated graphics and laptops. AMD's GPUs will become more popular with their competitive pricing, as it will make sense for pre-built manufacturers to put their GPUs into setups. Nvidia is starting to lose the battle by overpricing their GPUs and by focusing too much on servers and AI. If the part of the company that makes the gaming GPUs wants to survive, they absolutely need to break off and start under a new name to keep dominating the market. Story 45. A few come to mind from the UK. W.H. Smith. W.H. Smith, a newsagent/bookstore type place in the UK. They always smell of damp carpet and never seem to be more than 2 customers in at a time. They've been circling the drain for years. Only the duty-free and train station stores keep them afloat. I can't see this going on for much longer. Argos. Anyone in the UK will know of the legendary Argos catalog from their childhood. Sainsbury's has been closing a lot of the stores and folding them into existing supermarkets as pickup-only points. Argos' only differentiator from the likes of Amazon was that you could walk in store and buy it right then. Without that, I can't see them lasting much longer. Subway. There's a massive shift towards having their stores as mini stores inside other shops, particularly the likes of Spar. The few standalone Subways near me are either always out of stock of basic stuff or are closed but haven't announced the fact. They also seem to be locked in a location battle with Greggs, which in the UK is a pointless endeavor as the British public are obsessed with sausage rolls. The post office. Lastly, the post office, highlighted by the recent news of the Horizon scandal. People just don't trust or use the post office anymore. I mean, if you want to send a parcel, Royal Mail will send a postie to pick it up from your house. About the only service people really still need the post office for is the passport check and send. Like Subway, the post office has succumbed to the shop inside a shop model, meaning your local Spar is like a mini shopping center these days. And if any of these stories got to you too, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.